Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our July 3rd Tuesday at 3 webcast series event, a deep dive from lift and shift to DaaS, otherwise known as Device as a Service. My name is Alan Falcon. I'm the CEO of Cumulus Global, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day and week to be joining us here live, or if you're doing so, watching this recording of this webcast on demand. For those live, before we get into the heart of our content today, a couple of reminders that the audio is muted to prevent any background noise from getting in the way. So if at any point in time during the session you have questions, please use the questions window. There's an icon along the right or top of your screen, and we do leave time for Q&A at the end as well, although we will try and answer questions in line as much as possible. This session is being recorded. As I noticed, it'll be posted generally within 24 hours on our website and available on demand. Feel free to share a link to anyone who you feel might find the content valuable. Another reminder that our 3T at T webcast series is one of many resources available in the resource center of our website. Currently, we're featuring 3 types of resources. This webcast series, our new weekly bulletins, Microsoft Cloud Monday and Google Workspace Wednesday. Those provide links to anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe 6 relevant updates, news stories, or other information about those environments, the Microsoft Cloud and the Google Cloud environments that are applicable to small and mid-sized entities. And also our library of ebooks, white papers, and other resources. As always, we do have a monthly newsletter. You can also access archives and subscribe to that online, as well as get recordings of past webcasts, both from this series and our Coffee and Cloud series as well. And of course, as with most companies, we're active in blogging, trying to get several good blog posts in there with current information out to you each month. So please check out the Resource Center. If there's anything you'd like to see or anything that you think should be better, let us know as well. We're always looking to meet the needs of our community and provide valuable information and resources. So diving into the content today, when we talk about lift and shift and device as a service, really what is the business goal that's driving it? And in most of our client interactions, looking at how to improve their IT environment, the real goal is about overall productivity, which we'll define as successfully and efficiently performing assigned tasks and functions individually, of course, but also as a team and across teams. And that's really enabled by collaboration, communications, a consistent user experience where people are comfortable doing their work on top of other components. And when we look at how we meet that goal, there's always with productivity, a lot of people think it's speed. I want to be productive. I want to get as much done as possible, but you pay a penalty if the quality is not there. You want employees to be successful. They want their work also to be meaningful. You need the process to be both efficient and sustainable. So things that cut corners that could create problems down the road aren't necessarily the most sustainable. And so when we think about the elements of productivity for context here, folks within your organization should have a shared understanding of goals and objectives. That leads to defining procedures and processes and even a user experience on how that happens. Obviously, your people and your teams need the knowledge and skills to do their job well, and they want to do it and need to do it within a healthy and supportive work environment. And around all of that is, again, we're back to that communications and collaboration. And so technology really supports productivity in 2 ways. It empowers your individual teams, and it really does enable your organization. And so when we think about how technology supports productivity, and as we start looking at what role lift and shift and DaaS plays into the productivity of your organization and the benefits to your company, we want you to keep in mind our SPARK model. And SPARK is an acronym for security, performance, availability, reliability, and cost. Because whatever you make IT changes and you're thinking in a strategic way, all 5 of these factors are important. It's not, obviously it needs to do what you need it to do from a functional standpoint. You need access to the data that's appropriate. That's all the function. Around that, it needs to be secure. Data needs to be private. Your business, your employees, your data, your client and customers' data all needs to be secure. It needs to perform well so people can work efficiently and effectively. It needs to be available, whether someone's in the office, working remotely. they need to be able to have access to it, and that availability needs to be reliable. You don't want downtime. You don't want long outages. You don't want many small outages either. Both of those come with a different impact. And finally, cost. It has to work within your budget and add value to your business, whether you're looking to thrive or you're looking, to survive. That cost becomes really important. And so when we look at small and mid-sized entities and businesses, we see that most are in a particular spot in their journey with cloud. And that, it's been easy to move email, calendars, contacts, some chat, most of the chat and messaging, and even meetings management and meetings handling into the clouds. This is where Microsoft Teams, Google Meets, Zoom, GoTo, all, WebEx all come into play, as well as your Microsoft 365 and your Google Workspace productivity environments. We see file sharing in the cloud as well as people start to use OneDrive and SharePoint file services in their 365 ecosystems and are more apt to use MyDrive and Share Drives in the Google Workspace environment. But we still see a lot of businesses that have files living in those environments in the cloud, as well as on-premise. And when I talk about on-premise, that could be a local file server in your office. It could be files kept locally on laptops or other mobile devices. It also includes files kept physically local within network access storage devices or storage area network devices that you might have physically in your office, or even physically within a data center that you're leasing or contracting or having it hosted. The future of the cloud journey is what's next. It's, first off, finish taking that file sharing and really moving it into the cloud-based file services. And for most small, mid-sized companies, that really means fully utilizing SharePoint file services and OneDrive on the Microsoft side and Share Drives and MyDrive on the Google Workspace side. In general, OneDrive and Microsoft and MyDrive and Google Workspace map really well to personal work areas, where Share Drives and Google and the SharePoint file services map really well to replicating the type of services you get when you have a physical file server, as far as administratively and centrally owned storage that's centrally managed as far as permissions, access controls, etc. We also see a future in small, mid-sized businesses with advanced productivity tools, moving beyond the core of the productivity suite and bringing in workflow automation, tapping into the current evolution of artificial intelligence and machine learning-based tools, both for internal process improvements as well as customer-facing processes and services. The future also includes getting your applications and systems into the cloud as well. And we'll talk about what that looks like and how we move forward with that in a bit more detail as we continue on through this session. When we talk about file servers to services, I've already mentioned that most small businesses are partway there. And it's a great example of the cloud journey and how things will shift as we move into broader lift and shift and moving of applications. When we talk about file servers, we're talking about physical infrastructure. It comes with the hardware acquisition and maintenance. You have to do performance and capacity management. You need enough storage, right? Your accessibility is limited. It's very high speed on premise. It's slower and costly for remote users. Why? They're remoting in PC to PC to get access, or you have a VPN from an individual's laptop at home or their computer at home into the local area network, or you have some sort of syncing tool that syncs it up to a cloud service that then lets them access that way. In any case, the user experience, aside from those performance issues and the additional logins and steps people have to take to do their work, the user experience is inconsistent. When someone walks into the office, they connect to the LAN, they connect to the Wi-Fi, they log into their application, the drives get mapped, the applications run, you're there. When you're out of the office, in order to get remote access into your office, you have to take an extra step if it's going to be secure. And so this comes with, a lot of infrastructure that has an impact on the way people work and how they can work. And we often see users struggle with things like printing and how those map when you're in the office versus out of the office and things of that nature, as well as just general trouble with the added security of VPN, encryption keys, things of that nature. When you switch that to services, your infrastructure becomes limited, right? You need internet access and either a smart client, like OneDrive for desktop or Google, desktop for Google Drive, or a browser, and you need internet access. So your accessibility goes from something that's very limited and pre-programmed and fixed to basically providing secure access anywhere, anytime. More importantly, you have this consistent user experience. When I log in to my laptop in the office, my Google Drive for desktop and my OneDrive for desktop apps spin up. They start when Windows boots up. They log me in. They authenticate. It's secure. It's encrypted, and boom, I've got letter drive and map drive access to both environments, or either environment I might be working with. When I'm working from home, it's the same thing. I don't have to start a VPN to connect to the office and make sure I'm in, and then things connect. It just connects because it's me directly to the cloud. And so you save a lot by eliminating the physical servers and providing that easy, seamless access to your file through services. Additionally, by eliminating those physical servers, you're eliminating the need for endpoint protection on those devices. You're not paying device management fees to your MSP anymore. Backup and recovery is handled differently, and it can be much more cost effective. And when you're using file services in the cloud, there's a built-in level of continuity. Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace are both engineered to have continuity built in. If they have systems outages, you're running on more than one system. If they're having data center issues, your data's in more than one data center. Chances are you're going to keep up and running. That's not the case if you've got that physical server on site and that physical server has problems or your physical network has problems. Additionally, your office loses power due to a large storm. No, you can access your environment from anywhere. You can work from home. You can drive to, out of the county or out of the state or out of the city to some place that has power, and connect to get an internet connection there to a hotel, a restaurant, a library, and keep yourself working. So you have many more options to make sure that your business stays running. Now, this extends not only to file services built within Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, but to the much broader range of file services and storage available in Google Cloud as well as Microsoft Azure. And again, those services tend to come with local redundancy within the data center and options that are extremely affordable for geo redundancy across data centers of your choosing. And so you have that continuity built in and those services, integrated services available to you to provide it at a lower cost and a better user experience than that on-premise file server. So we sort of take that model of saying, how do we get from servers to services, and think about the applications we're running. And this is where we start talking about migrating to the cloud, focusing on your applications and systems. And so a perfect example is we were working with a client of ours. They're running Sage 100, a very common, very powerful financial and ERP system for small, mid-sized businesses. Sage has a SaaS version, a cloud-based version of their system. This client of ours can't use it. Why? They have a high level of customization in the product, and they have a independent third-party customized inventory system that they've integrated. Well, one, their customizations won't carry forward yet into the SaaS version, and two, the third-party inventory system won't integrate with the SaaS version, doesn't run as a SaaS model at all yet. And so without that ability, how do they get that physical server, physical file structures, databases, everything out of their data closet in their data room up into the cloud? And there's a couple of ways we look at migration strategies. And obviously, if it's an old app and you retire and replace it with something else, it's one thing. Companies will retain, and sometimes there's a need for applications and systems to stay on premise. Certainly, when we work with manufacturing and distribution companies, process control systems that are running machinery and monitoring the environment generally need to be on premise. But then there's four other ways that are really the migration strategies: rehosting, replatforming, repurchase or replace, and refactoring. And these differ. And a lot of times when you hear about companies moving into the cloud, it's large companies and they're doing the heavy lifting of refactoring where they're rebuilding things from scratch. That's not SMBs. We use, as I mentioned, like Sage 100, we use packaged software that if it has a SaaS version we can use, that's great. We'll head in that direction. If not, we need another solution. So when we talk about rehosting, that's moving existing servers to cloud servers with similar configurations. You provide access from your internal network, or for better performance and security and a better user experience, you build in the remote desktop component to it. And we'll go over what that looks like and what that is in a few moments. You can then optimize that environment for performance and cost and provide the full ecosystem, so, including identity management, backup recovery continuity, as I mentioned, as well as advanced security permissions and, if necessary, data loss prevention capabilities. So you can rehost it, just move it out. What you generally get is a higher quality of security, availability and reliability, comparable cost, and oftentimes better performance. And we'll talk about how that gets optimized and how that all fits in as well. Replatforming is when you rehost and then you modify portions of the architecture to leverage cloud efficiencies. And this is often a second step. We won't get into it much. We're not going to talk about it much here today, other than to say things like, hey, I moved my accounting system, from physical servers into the cloud, and then after it was up and running, I was able to replace a SQL server that's running on a cloud server with all the licensing and replace it with Microsoft SQL Services native in Azure and use native Azure storage. And that lowered my cost and made it easier to do backups and manage. And so there's a second step often with replatforming. Know it's out there. We're focused today on rehosting and repurchasing and replacing. Because replacing is when you take the existing system and you get a new cloud solution. So the most common, we talked about file servers moving to OneDrive and shared drives, etc. Going from QuickBooks Desktop to the SaaS version available from QuickBooks.com, if it's got the capabilities and the tools and the integration and the reporting that you need. Not everything in the, particularly the Premier editions or Enterprise editions of the desktop QuickBooks software is available in the cloud yet. And we often see people moving contact managers and desktop databases for customer relationship management to HubSpot, Salesforce, Zoho CRM, things of that nature. Refactoring, as I mentioned earlier, that's really large companies, mid-size and large companies, because they're rethinking everything, how an application is architected and developed, and they start over and build it using all cloud-native services or predominantly cloud-native services, often close to 100% rebuild. That's not us. We're repurchase, replace, and rehost for the most part. So when you think about the effort, repurchasing is often the easiest, right? If you're a solopreneur running QuickBooks and you're using the desktop version, you can literally subscribe to QuickBooks.com online. It will import your data and have you up and running in an hour or two. And you can pretty much do that yourself, right? The cost, the effort, the skills are pretty low. It's a little bit more to rehost. We've got to size your servers. We've got to make the connection. We got to make sure people can log in from their different devices. But again, pretty quick migration, because you're moving something that exists from point A to point B and changing the way you access it to make it easier and more efficient. So we look at small, mid-sized businesses, rehosting is greater from a cost benefit than replatforming or refactoring. That's why we focus there. And yet the impact is great, right? Obviously, if you can take an on-premise application or system and replace it with a cloud version, more power to you. It's a low to moderate migration effort with a high return on business agility and value. Rehosting, again, moderate business agility and value for low to moderate effort, but certainly better cost benefit, if you will, than refactoring or replatforming for small, mid-sized companies. So we talk about, rehosting. What are we looking at? And that's really lift and shift is sort of the industry terminology. And why? Because you're lifting the physical and you're taking it away and you're shifting it into the cloud. And it's really, best defined as moving on-premise servers, physical or virtual, to a cloud resident server or environment. And it's that rehosting model. And oftentimes things move as is or with minor modifications. And when I talk about with modifications, a lot of times that's rebalancing the performance of the cloud server to do better, to perform better at a lower cost than the physical on-premise system. Oftentimes people are doing this because their servers are reaching end of life and they're looking at, thousands of dollars in hardware for the servers, thousands of dollars to upgrade, modernize, improve performance, and have enough capacity on disk space. With that, they're going to trigger operating system upgrades, which will trigger upgrades to ancillary systems, including endpoint protection for malware, backup and recovery software and hardware. Often needs to be upgraded in consort, and so effectively you get this effect. So what does this look like, though, when we talk about lift and shift? So traditional infrastructure, you've got servers on a network, you've got clients, that's the term we're going to use for PCs or laptops or even smartphones. And yep, I realize our graphic here of a smartphone's a little dated. You can't get the Blackberries anymore. And you've got your costs, which is both capital expenditure for acquisition and capacity management and operating expense per device for managed services if you're working with a managed service provider. And so zooming in a little bit, traditional environment, you've got your internet, you've got your connectivity mode, what's a Fios or a cable modem for your broadband service that may or may not have a firewall. We recommend most small businesses have a separate router firewall. Inside that, you've got a switch where you're plugging in physical things, or you have Wi-Fi access points that laptops, desktops, even smartphones, iPhones, etc., can connect to provide that networking environment. And the key element is that you've got the server, but chances are you have more than one server. And that can be more than one physical server as well as more than one virtual server. So in order to support a file server and an application server that runs an application with the database, in the Microsoft networking world, you also need a domain controller. And ideally, that's a separate server for your primary domain controller, and you should have a backup domain controller, which doesn't necessarily need to be a separate physical server, but should be a separate virtual server. So if you virtualize, you have 4 virtual servers that you need running on ideally 2 separate pieces of hardware. That's a bit complex, and it's not really necessary. Because when we look at virtual desktop, the infrastructure changes. You still have servers and desktops, but everything's cloud-based now. And yes, you still have a physical client that someone logs in from. We'll get to that in a second. But your network infrastructure is seriously reduced. And there's really no difference to how you connect to your environment, whether you're on or off premise, which is key to end user productivity, as well as availability and reliability, and to a large extent, performance. Your client devices can be any format. You can access virtual desktops that are cloud hosted, which is what we're talking about here in a virtual desktop infrastructure. You can access it with an HTML5 browser, as well as client apps on Android, iOS, Windows, and Mac, right? And so here, aside from the end user device, you've eliminated your capital expenditure, and everything now is operating expense that you can scale based on utilization. And so you can swing it up and down, and we'll talk about a couple of different ways. So zooming in, what happens? You have your client devices, and I'm using the Microsoft Azure and the Windows Virtual Desktop environment as an example. We can do this within Google Cloud Platform as well. So your client device, you boot it up, you run the client app, or you open up a link in the web browser and log in. You're now connected into the Microsoft Azure environment. Administratively, there's a broker, there's management of the session, gateway services, administrative and diagnostic tools, all behind the scenes. What you get is a desktop that you've logged into. And that could be a Windows 7, a Windows 10, now Windows 11 desktop. Really Windows 10 and Windows 11 now. That gives you a desktop that looks and feels as if it was running local on your machine at this point. The difference is it's running hosted on a shared server that's private to your business in the cloud, connected over a high-speed network to the servers you need. So it can be file services are connected to the, are accessible from that desktop, or servers running your business applications. So for example, we as a business, we run on QuickBooks Premier Edition. We connect in, we get an image of a Windows desktop. That desktop, has the QuickBooks client on it that connects to a second server that's running the QuickBooks engine and database. Both of those environments are backed up within that Azure framework. So all of our work is protected above and beyond the actual QuickBook backups that run automatically from QuickBooks as well. And you can provide, and when you set up this environment, you can not only present the full desktop, you can actually present specific applications. So if you have folks working in your organization that have specific job functions and only use a specific application, their connection to the cloud can only present that application. They log in, they're in the app. They don't get a desktop, they don't get the other features, or it can be the full robust environment. Okay, and what you've done now is the client device is providing the I/O, right, the input-output, the screen presentation, the keyboard clicks, the mouse actions, a mapping to local printers. That's it. All of the processing is being done on that workstation that's running virtually on a server, on one server in your cloud environment, connecting to applications and files located elsewhere in your private, secure cloud environment. So we're really talking about optimizing infrastructure here. So again, traditional, you've got capital expenditures, servers and clients, as well as upgrades. And the challenge with upgrades is when you buy a new server, when you add more disk space, you're trying to be predictive because you don't want to do that very often. So you buy a new server and you're thinking, how much disk space do I need with the server for the next 3 to 5 years? You're paying for disk space that you may never use. And so you're paying for idle assets. You still have operating expenditures, including monitoring and management. If you're working with an MSP here in the Northeast, to monitor a database server or a file server or a domain control server can run anywhere from $250 to $500 a month. The average is between $350 and $400 a month. So roughly, if you've got your primary and backup domain controller, a file server, and one application server, those 4 servers combined are going to cost you somewhere between $1,200 and $2,000 a month for monitoring and management. When we move that into cloud services, both GCP and Azure have monitoring of those environments and alerts that you would normally have to, install third-party software to catch and report and aggregate. They have systems built in that do that already. Now, that doesn't mean you might not want or have specific needs for advanced monitoring with third-party tools. But for most small mid-sized businesses, the default tools are sufficient. You can save money on that operating cost and still have a monitored and managed environment. And of course, in the traditional, because you've got physical hardware, you have endpoint protection, domain infrastructure, BCDR hardware and software for business continuity, disaster recovery, backup, restore, security environment and tools, and infrastructure, hardware and software for remote access. That domain infrastructure, basic BCDR services, security, and that access, identity management, and access control is built into that environment. You're still going to pay for endpoint protection for your files and things of that nature and put that on that virtual server. But these other aspects are there. So it comes embedded in the monthly cost at a lower cost than having to build out all this infrastructure. So the architecture, when you're cloud forward and thinking about lift and shift and having those servers and even virtual desktops in the cloud, on premise, you still have your firewall, your switches, your wireless infrastructure, clients, printers, and as I said earlier, your business may have systems that require physical proximity. In the cloud now is your identity and access management. So you don't need Active Directory controllers and domain controllers or LDAP controllers physically present. You have the virtual desktop or the remote desktop environment. So all your processing is happening in the cloud within a highly secure data center on a highly secure network. That network, well, it's virtual, it's private to you. And it is locally redundant. You have the ability to make it geographically redundant as well. You put your database and applications and servers there, your file services that go beyond what's included with Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace as needed. Because you have a single identity and access management system, that single identity doesn't just get you access to your virtual desktop with all your applications, it gets you access to your email communications. And of course, we put in the continuity in the BCDR, much of which is built into the ecosystem running in a highly redundant, well-managed data center from Microsoft or Google. You will need some protection for your data specifically. As well, we put that in. And again, that cost is lower because we don't have to build hardware and software infrastructure to do it. There's services we can tap into that are already part of that ecosystem that work really well. So let's take a look at 5 reasons for lift and shift, and then we'll talk about devices of service, and we'll get back to our Spark model. And so the first reason to go ahead and lift and shift is end of life. Right? And that's, we look at Microsoft Server, and I'm sorry about the little formatting mess up here, but Windows Server 2012 R2 hits final end of life this October. Next July is SQL Server 2014, and Windows 10 gets fully retired in October of next year. The addition from the second half of last year, which is Microsoft's fiscal half, 22 H2 is the final version. There'll be no more versions. There'll still be limited bug fixes and security fixes as needed. So there can be server end of life happening. Server hardware also typically has roughly a 5-year lifespan. Small businesses sometimes try and extend it out as long as 7. And when you replace that server, you're refreshing it. And so you end up overbuying memory, disk, CPU capacity because, again, you're planning 5 years in the future. And if you're virtualizing and adding virtual machines, it might lower the amount of hardware you're buying, but you're buying more software, and it increases complexity and cost that way. It costs more to manage virtual machines. It's another layer of system software. It's another layer of expertise that need to be in place. So when we look at the cloud, you can upgrade your systems as needed. You can literally say, this server that I'm running my database on that has 8 CPU cores or 12 gigs of RAM, I really need to take it up to 16 gigs of RAM. You can literally go into the management portal and say, change that server from A to B, and it'll reboot. And when it reboots, it's got the new hardware configuration. Additionally, you can manage the patches and the updates to the operating systems, so you never are impacted at end of life in a way that forces you to upgrade hardware and do purchases. It is a maintenance process as opposed to a replacement process. If you have multiple locations, you can avoid costly secure options for site-to-site networking and avoid the use of point-to-point VPNs, which add complexity, reduce performance, and add cost. You get the benefits of everyone accessing. And here, whether it's Azure or Office, Microsoft 365, the message here is the same, whether it's headquarters or branch office or a coffee shop or your home office or a hotel, you are securely going over the public internet through an internet service provider and connecting with the cloud-based infrastructure. So you lose all that necessary point-to-point communications, the added security and infrastructure costs that come with it. Again, lowering your capital expenditures and reducing your monthly operating expense. We worked with one client, 2 facilities, less than 2 miles apart, to get enough bandwidth for their accounting system to work. It was needed by people in both environments. They had multiple T1s bundled to get the network bandwidth. They, at the time, were paying about $2,800 a month to connect the 2 facilities. We did the lift and shift, got their servers off premise. Everyone now is using basic broadband. Even commercially grade broadband between the 2 facilities, they were paying $600 a month. So a significant savings operationally. At the same time, they didn't have to worry about wires being down, worry as much about wires being down or the impact that the VPN was having on performance and reliability. It made it more reliable, made it more available. And guess what? If someone was out not feeling well, they could work from home and still get their work done. Or when people are traveling on business, they could work from a hotel room where before they really couldn't. We live in the world of hybrid work. Some of us thought or hoped that maybe it would go away. Others are glad it's here to stay. We've got people working in the office or at home or both, as well as other remote locations. So when you do your lift and shift, you avoid expensive infrastructure such as VPN, hardware and software, remote desktop gateway servers like Citrix servers and things of that nature with the connection brokers, or even the PC to PC mirroring. Yes, we still run into small businesses that have a PC on someone's desk, and then on their laptop, they have GoToMyPC software that connects over the internet from wherever the laptop is to that physical PC running in the office. Then they have the view of what's on the network and can operate that PC remotely. That's a low-cost solution for one PC. The problem happens, boom, they're traveling, they had a power outage, and that PC doesn't reboot. They're out of luck, they can't work, right, until someone can get in and reboot that PC for them. The other challenge with that hybrid work is when someone's remote, someone's in the office, it's a very different user experience. This adds on support tickets and service calls, mistakes being made as far as where files are located. People tend to avoid and short circuit, try and avoid the additional complexity for when they're working remotely. So they're more apt to copy important company data to local hard drives before they travel, for example. And then figure out how to update it when they get back in can result in lost data. When you move to the cloud, because you're connecting directly, you're device and location agnostic, you're leveraging broadband internet from a cost perspective, and you're creating that single user experience that makes it easier for people to get their jobs done and is a boost to productivity. Business continuity is the next reason to look at lift and shift. It's more than data restore, right? It's how you manage return to operations, right? And so when you have local hardware systems that fail, chances are you have backup and recovery, the ability to get your data back. But if you have a server and your disk array goes down, you need time to diagnose what's wrong, to order replacement parts, have them delivered, have them installed, potentially have the system rebuilt, depending on what failed and how. Then you can start restoring your data, right? When we're operating in the cloud, your disaster risk is limited. One, because there's inherent redundancy in how your servers are running in the cloud. You still have data backup and recovery, but you're protected from hardware and network failure. The BCDR services are integrated. And even if you want to protect against not just small D disaster, but big D disasters, you can be geo-redundancy across multiple data centers, even multiple regions of the country or the world. And so when you think about what it takes, it's not, how long it can take. We worked with a client, for example, whose laptop died, and they weren't sure why. So it happened in the morning. They had a customer meeting. They had the customer meeting without their laptop. Not knowing what else to do, they went to Best Buy. Best Buy took the machine, called them back the next morning, as Best Buy often does, says, we need to replace your hard drive. We'll order one. It'll be ready tomorrow or the next day. They said, okay, do it. Best Buy did it. Best Buy reinstalled Windows. Then this client went ahead and had to reinstall all their applications, and then they could go to their backup and restore the files. They were without a functioning laptop for almost 8 days duration. Now, if they were running in a virtual desktop environment and the laptop they carry with them that they used to access it died, they could get a Chromebook, they could go to the library and use a machine, they could use a home computer, they could go to the business center of a hotel, anywhere with a browser, they could have accessed and kept working and had access to their PC, their client, because it's up in the cloud and protected, while that physical laptop was getting repaired or replaced. In fact, we even offer a service called cloud continuity for PCs, where we'll capture multiple times a day an image of your laptop. So if something happens, you can go to a browser and actually have your physical laptop running as well. And we can have you up and running in hours rather than days. Well, the broken device gets repaired, replaced, whatever, and restored, because that takes time. So business continuity is another reason to look for the cloud. And the final reason is transformation. It's easier to start transformation. And I know digital transformation is this marketing term that goes whoosh over the heads of so many of us. And as a small business owner, I too say, well, it sounds like digital transformation with everything involved is really for bigger companies. But it doesn't have to be big. It can be automating a process, one or two processes to make things more efficient. It could be removing redundant services so that everyone in the company is working the same way and can work together more easily. We do a lot of that with our clients with respect to meeting services and video conferencing now. It's connecting data to collaboration, right? So in the Microsoft ecosystem, if you're running your financial system on premise and you're running Microsoft 365 as your productivity suite, if you move that financial system into a cloud-based server, into Azure, you now have the ability to connect the Power BI app that comes with Microsoft 365 on the back end into that SQL Server database that's driving your financial system, generate reports, create dashboards with drill down, all those cool business intelligence things, and make that connection. To do that with on-premise systems requires additional hardware and software expertise, consultants, etc. And and now in the cloud, you've got the low-code, no-code automation. This isn't even getting into some of the AI and generative capabilities that are coming out now. This is being able to use AppScript or Flow and Forms to automate processes or tools within the cloud environment to create machine language driven bots for customer interactions on your website or in your service ticketing system. All of these opportunities are available to small and mid-sized businesses affordably in the cloud, very expensive and challenging to do on-premise, a motivation to move. And so with this, we keep talking about VDI, remote desktop, and desktop as a service. And different terms for often the same thing, right? And here's sort of a diagram of what you have, right? In the cloud, you've got 4 components, right? You have your storage, that's your, and this is using Azure as an example. This works well the same way in GCP. Different names for the services, but same capabilities. You've got in the Azure environment, your storage is your data disk arrays that are built, your storage subscription, right? You've got remote clients. This can be a PC, it can be a Chromebook, it can be any device with a web browser that connects through the internet to a gateway server, which also provides that web interface to use. That gateway server is then connected to your infrastructure service, which is domain controller, which provides DNS and file server, and it has the remote desktop connection broker and license services. Does this person have a license, and are they allowed to connect, and have they securely connected? Yes. Boom, you go to another server that has your remote desktop session. It's the host, and sometimes refers to a farm and more than one. And one of the beautiful things about it, and I talked earlier about this client that we moved into the cloud. We're in the process of upgrading their environment now with current capabilities, because over the course of the day, they have as many as 16 people who might need access to the financial system. But most of the time, there's only 6 to 7, half the max, and early morning, late in the day, overnight, access is occasional. At most, they have 2 or 3. So we're setting it up right now that 24 hours a day, there'll be 4 virtual desktops ready for people to connect to, sessions, running on a host. As soon as someone logs into that 4th desktop, another host in the farm, another session host in the farm will spin up, and there'll be another 4 available connections. And when connection number 8 is made, we'll spin up the opportunity for connections 9 to 12, etc., up to 16. As the day wears on, as people log out, the minute you drop to 11 connections, that extra server for connections 13 to 16 go down, blah, 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 follows the same, sorry, I shouldn't say blah, 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 la-da-da, whatever. As user count drops towards the end of the day, the number of host sessions is reduced. The number of servers hosting those sessions goes down. And overnight, you're back down to 1. In doing so, really helps manage cost, right? And performance. And it can be dynamic as that. So you can leverage that client access. Its resources are, that's an example of on demand. We can also schedule resources. Like, for example, we know that we'll run backups at 1 in the morning. They'll be done by 1:30. from 2 in the morning to 5 in the morning, there's no need for anyone to be logging in. The company doesn't want people logging in at those hours. And so we'll shut everything down and lower the cost. So your resources aren't just scalable. It can be done for servers and desktops, and it can be done on a schedule or on demand. And when we talk about desktop as a service, we're talking about the overall service that says, hey, you're providing me a fully functioning Windows client desktop as a service I'm going to access from a physical device I carry with me or through a web browser. That's great. We can also talk as pay-as-you-go clients, where instead of buying the laptop you carry with you, you pay a monthly fee for that as well. And guess what? If it breaks, we send you a replacement. You send the broken one back. Even that more convenient. So desktop as a service can go all the way down to saying you don't even have to buy your laptops and desktops anymore. We'll give them to you for a monthly fee, and that includes, maintaining and managing the hardware as well as all the software. So that loops us back around to Spark, right? Security. Lift and Shift improves your security with identity and access management. It's integrated. You're operating in secure data centers. These are all certified, folks. Not just basic, but for HIPAA, PCI, ISO, Sarbanes-Oxley, FINRA, SEC, even governmental security now, up to top secret, the government clouds, etc. We can make sure you're in the right secure data center. And you have the ability to integrate. Your security is integrated across your productivity suite, whether it's Workspace or Microsoft 365, and the Lift and Shift remote access VDI platform, whether it's Google Cloud Platform environment and ecosystem or Microsoft Azure. Performance, it's scalable to meet your needs. Your server, it feels like the application's running a little slow. We can tweak the memory. We can tweak the CPU. We can even tweak the speed of the disks without having to buy new equipment and sell off old equipment. Basic security is there. So for most small and mid-sized companies, there's no need for the added layer of security of a VPN. Some businesses want or need that. We can do that as well. Again, it's thinner than if you're VPNing into your own ecosystem. Availability and reliability, we're talking 5.9 service quality from Google and Microsoft, professionally run infrastructure, built-in resilience with the option for geographic redundancy if you need a higher level of protection. And then there's cost, the C in the Spark, right? The end of the Spark that gives it its zing. You're going to save in capital expenditures by reducing on-premise hardware and system software. You're going to avoid paying for empty, unused capacity. You're going to eliminate those forklift upgrades where we're bringing in machines, servers, and disk, and using that opportunity to upgrade your network switches to operate with the faster servers and faster access points to operate with the faster switches. You avoid that cascade of hardware and system software costs. Additionally, we can extend the life of client devices. If all your client is doing is the internet communications, the screen I/O, keyboard, and mouse functions, and providing a route for printing output, you don't need to continue to upgrade your processor and your memory capacity at the same rate you do when you're actually running the applications on that device. In fact, many people move to thin clients, Windows S version, and Chrome because they don't need the heaviness and the bulkiness and the cost of full-blown laptops anymore. And you also get OpEx optimization. Right? We can scale environment to your needs. That's at the system level, processor memory of your servers, the storage, the size and speed of the network, as well as operationally day-to-day, up and down, hour by hour, the number of virtual clients we're running. Overall, it simplifies your environment, and because we're eliminating things that need to be managed, we're lowering those remote management and monitoring fees that MSPs charge every month. Oftentimes, operating expense initially in the cloud might be slightly more per month, given where you are in the life cycle of what we're moving. In most instances, almost all instances, the savings on remote monitoring and management overcome any modest increase in cost, significantly so. And so there's a cost advantage for operating expenses as well. So what's your action item? We always like to finish up before we head into Q&A with the action items. As always, assess your environment and your needs. Are you ready to do this kind of move? Do you have a need to do it? We'll sit down with you and figure out what can and cannot change. Again, not everything can move into the cloud. Similarly, not everything should. And we're very pragmatic about that. As much as we believe that everything that can and should be in the cloud move to the cloud, we understand that that's not 100% of everything, and we can help assess that. We can also define it in phases based on what makes most sense for your business and the trajectory of your business, your applications, your databases, and your utilization. At that point, with an understanding of are you ready and what could and should move, we can work with you to define your value proposition. And that's a holistic view of IT services. It's, yes, your cost structure is going to shift. What does that mean? What does that look like financially for your company and operationally to your company and its cash flow? What are you gaining that you don't have now? And is that gain, are those things you should be doing and can't afford to, or haven't, maybe you just haven't done them yet. Maybe you haven't done them because they add cost and you're not ready to incur that cost. As well as looking at the cost, comparing that with the cost of inaction. If you don't do it, where do you remain vulnerable? What holes do you have in your security footprint? What inefficiencies are you keeping? And what does that mean for the company? With an understanding of that and a holistic view, you can set priorities and make decisions and even phase things out. We'll work with you to plan out the solution. And we'll look at security, performance, availability, reliability, and cost. We're going to spark IT and your business and come up with that solution. And it could be right away all at once. It could be phased. It could be do A, not B. It could be do A now, maybe B later, C never. It all depends on your situation. But once we have that plan, we'll work with you to execute. And once we execute, we'll help you co-manage that environment for you, keep it running, keep it secure, help you onboard and offboard employees, help you upgrade, when it's time to upgrade those business apps, we'll support you in that effort as well, and keep you operating efficiently. And we'll review your cost and your running costs and constantly look for ways to optimize and be most cost effective. Our goal is to add value to the business. And so with that, the invitation, your call to action is to contact us. There's a QR code on the screen you can snag with your phone, or it's bit.ly/CG intro call. That'll connect you with one of our cloud advisors who'll gather some basic information. We'll then schedule a more detailed intro call if it's appropriate. If you want to contact us, you can also send us an email at info@cumulusglobal.com. You can contact me directly as well, Falcon@cumulusglobal.com. My phone number's there. I'm horrible about answering the phone, and I'm even worse about responding to voicemail messages. If you want a response, send me an email. I don't have an assistant. I'll get to it, or I'll make sure someone follows up quickly and loops me in as appropriate. So that said, we'll head into the Q&A session, but before I do, I'm just going to take a moment to thank those who are watching this on demand. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and week. I know, I can tell my voice is going a little hoarse. I've dumped a lot of information on you all at once, so please feel free to follow up with any questions, concerns, ideas, or requests that you have. Thanks for joining us. At this point in time, I'm going to stop the recording. It'll take a few seconds, and I'll head back into the Q&A session for those who are live. Thanks again, and look forward to seeing you at future webcasts.